Over the last decade in which I've been talking about and reviewing RPGs, especially Japanese RPGs, there is one invisible force that I think we all take for granted a little too much. And that's why I'm starting this series talking about the unsung heroes of Japanese RPGs, especially those that get officially localized or localized unofficially even from Japanese into English. There is so much incredibly important work that happens behind the scenes that just gets taken for granted. They completely color and flavor the entire experience that we get here in the West. And that is so incredibly important because there are so many things, so little nuances that cannot be literally translated from Japanese into English. They have to be that literary conduit and channel in a lot of ways what the Japanese writers had in mind to make that work in a more English speaking context. And that's why I wanted to just make this maybe the first of several, I hope, interviews with some of my favorite unsung heroes of RPG localization. Stick around, and I hope you enjoy this. Today's episode is brought to you by My Merch. Hand-printed, high-quality SuperDerek merch is available at shop.superderekrpgs.com to help you to remember to hype responsibly. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me, Leona, and it's good to have you here this beautiful Sunday morning. I hope you're having a great one so far.
It's been awesome. Thank you for having me too.
You bet. And for all my viewers who might not know who you are, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Leona Renee. I was formerly credited as Brittany Avery, and I work in video game localization as an editor. I also do project management, but I mainly work in Japanese to English game localization. I've done some Korean to English and like Chinese Mandarin to English, but my main specialty is Japanese to English. I did a lot of editing and help on Trails in the Sky SC, the second game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was the editor for the third. I was also the editor for, or the lead editor for Trails of Cold Steel 2.
That's so cool. I actually just finished Cold Steel 2, and I'm so happy with that. It came out so well.
I'm glad you liked it. I worked really hard on that one. I guess I should say I do the. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're good. I interrupted. I'm sorry. I was just saying. Oh well, it shows that it was clearly worked really hard on. So you did a outstanding job there.
I did do the casting for Cold Steel 1 and 2 though too, for voice casting.
So. Oh, nice. Okay. Well, I think you did a phenomenal job there as well as a fan of the Critical Role. You know, a lot of the people who I recognized instantly, Talis and Jaffe did a phenomenal job. Matthew Mercer, Marisha Ray, solid casting choices.
It's really like wild to see like a bunch of people like that I had cast with them, and they were already wonderful, like well-known talents already, but then Critical Role happened and they just like skyrocketed, and I was like, oh, I have a lot of really strong talents in this game now.
That must have been pretty awesome to see that happen, you know.
It's always awesome to see like people get like bigger and bigger, and you're like, you guys like were on my game, and then you go so big and like so prominent, and you're everywhere now, and I'm like that just like you can't be happier.
Oh yeah. So how did you actually get into the business of becoming a localization editor and just being into game localization in the first place? How does one find themselves doing that?
So my story is very unconventional, and it's more of a journey. So I don't have any like college degree or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically one day I had like gotten into like the cosplay scene, and I didn't really cosplay much. I was more into drinking and partying cosplayers.
Sure.
And a group was in LA, and I used to crash at their place. I would fly over from Maryland, where my family lived, to Los Angeles, and I'd crash at their place. And I was like, man, I really love Los Angeles. Like, this is such a cool place. And they were like, well, why don't you live here? And so I went back home. I went to a party because, you know, I'm like 21 at this point.
Sure.
Of course, I'm going to be drinking a bunch. And I got blackout drunk at that party. And I called my parents to pick me up. And while I was completely wasted, I was like, I'm going to move to California. And they were like, yeah, sure. You're totally gonna do that, sweetie. You're just drunk." And like a month later, I had my bags packed and I had like a service for my car to move across the country, and I was in California. And I was stupid because that was during like the 2008, 2010 like
Oh.
housing crisis
Mm-hmm.
where nobody could get a job and everything was terrible
Uh-huh.
and I couldn't get a job anywhere.
Wow.
I like had applied to like fast food places, I just like literally anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got really, really desperate after I finally got a job at a Subway. And I ended up quitting after 3 days because there was no air circulation there and I passed out. And I was
Oh
like,
my
well, this isn't
gosh.
good.
Yeah.
And I felt really bad because it was like, that was like the only job I'd gotten in like 6 months,
Yeah.
but I still quit it. And I started writing to companies and I was like, I'm desperate to get out of the house. Please, like, I don't have any money. But I'm willing to work for free.
Oh wow.
Just please get me out of the house. And a company called XSEED Games was the only one that responded. And they were like, yeah, come in and intern with us. And a month later, they offered me a job.
Wow.
And like after a month of interning with them. And then I just basically worked my way up from there, just
Wow.
learning, all because at a company as small as XSEED was at the time, I think they're bigger now, but it's been about 5 years since I worked there. But
Yeah.
at the time, they were really small, like 10-ish people. You can learn a little bit from every role, so it was like really nice to be able to like absorb everything I could and move up from there.
Reminds me a little bit of my own story of like when I moved away from home in Kansas. I was like, I want to move to Seattle. As it so happened, I also did that at like the beginning of '08 because I'm also really smart.
We
So
are companions then.
so yeah, we sold off whatever we could, and then just packed up the car with everything that we couldn't afford to lose, like the crappiest TV you could ever see, and like yours ended up taking you in some really cool places. Um,
Oh yeah, for sure.
so have you got any like really, I guess, just funny stories from any of your times at working with Xseed or anywhere doing some localizations or anything memorable that you'd also like to share?
I will say, oh my God, this one involves drinking too. This makes me sound like an alcoholic, and I swear I'm not. I really don't drink that much.
That's all right. I mean,
But
we
I
were all
do.
we were all 21 once.
Yeah, but I mean, I used to make Skittles vodka because basically you just take vodka
Hmm.
and you sort the Skittles by color, and then you just uh, filter vodka through these Skittles, and it creates like a rainbow of vodka that tastes super sugary, so you can
Hmm.
just drink it straight. And I used to make that for like the office because on Fridays we were allowed to have like a beer, and during live streams, like when we used to live stream the games, they used to
Yeah.
let us. I was always very, very nervous about going on live streams. I'm not big on cameras or anything like that. So I was allowed to have my shots if I wanted to. And that's basically like that helped calm me down and like actually do live streams. Although there was like some where I just kept going. I'm trying to
So
think of specific localization examples like that are actually applied to localization. Those are like, I would say they're like less funny and just more like this is the process.
yeah. So I guess, and speaking about that process, is there any myths or just misconceptions that you'd like to finally put to rest after hearing X and X such and such thing online? Something that just does not sound like it tracks at all.
There's a lot of like ideas that like the localization team has a lot of control over the localization,
Hmm.
and that they can change whatever they want whenever they want.
Yeah.
But I would say that that is kind of something that you talk to the devs about. So the developers have to agree to the changes. If you make any changes, they have to be open to them. Obviously, if they say, hey, don't touch it, like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So it's stuff like, I mean, that's like applies more to like if there's censorship in a game or something like that.
Hmm.
XA normally went the opposite direction with that. Like with Trails in the Sky the Third, there's some stuff that was taken out of the PSP version in Japan
Hmm.
due to being like, some pretty pertinent content.
Sure.
But we actually kept it in the PC version. It felt relevant to the story, basically, and it was still pretty much canon to the main story, so we wanted to keep it. And the devs were cool with that. They were just like, yeah, that's fine. Go for it.
Wow, that's super cool of them.
Oh, you know what? I do have a funny story. I do. So
Oh,
I
okay.
just thought of one. If you don't mind going back to the
Oh,
previous
I would be
question,
so happy to.
Akiba's Trip 2.
Mhm.
I don't know if you ever played that game.
I haven't made it there yet.
It's okay. It is basically a super anime game about a kid who turns into like a vampire-esque character.
Hmm.
And it turns out, and they're not called vampires, they're called synthesters. And the idea is that Akiba is full of, like, the city of Akiba is full of these synthesters, and the only way to get rid of them is to have them burn in the sun. So how do you do that? You tear off their clothes. So
Right,
you
of
just run
course.
around the city and you tear off their clothes, and everyone's trying to tear off your clothes, and it's not sexy, it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. Like, it is a weird game and it's so funny. But there was a feature in it, in the Japanese version, where for the female bosses, if you tore off all their clothes, like got them down to their lingerie,
Hmm.
there was like a cut-in art of them, like a sexy cut-in art of them in their lingerie.
Hmm.
But the male bosses, there was no cut-in art. And I was playing the game and I was like, well, that's not fair. I want to see sexy guys in their underwear too.
Yeah.
And so my boss was like, you know, that's kind of an interesting point. So we emailed the dev team and we were like, can you make sexy cut-in art for the guys? And they were like, okay.
Oh, that's incredible.
So the English version of the game had the sexy cut-in art first, and then when they re-released the game in Japan, they actually included that in the Japanese version too.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Equal opportunity, sexy cut-in art. Just
Yes.
because I was just like, where's my
That's-
sexy cut-in art of the guys?
That's the direction I would like things to go. You know, let's objectify men too. Let's just objectify everybody.
I mean, it was just, I mean, this game was obviously fan servicey and like to an extent, there was no toning that down. It was ridiculous, but I mean, we were just like, well, why not just go 110%? Let's go
Yeah.
all the way.
That's so awesome.
And it was successul. Like, the devs were completely open to it.
That's
And I
so
think-
cool. And it's cool that you got to be a part of that, like, inspiration for that change in the game. That is
I
so
don't
cool.
think that happens every day. Like, that is a pretty exceptional example. I know that, like, Sega Atlas, they have like some interesting stories where the devs like are open to like adjusting the English version in ways that are interesting for them. But I mean, I don't hear about it from like most companies. Usually if it's like a big change, it's like usually cutting content or something.
Yeah.
So them adding content, like drawing completely new art, and that art was not like, we were worried they were going to tone it down, or if it was just going to be, you know, kind of just a drawing of a dude in his underwear, but it's not sexy. They
Yeah.
went full like the sexy poses and all this other stuff too. They were just like, they went all in, and we were so happy.
That's incredible. I guess that brings me to the next question that I'd like to ask you is like, what are some skills that you have or that you would like to have that have just like lent themselves really well to the process of localization?
So I don't have a degree. I'd mentioned that before, but a lot of localization editors do have English degrees. So it's a great thing to have. It definitely doesn't hurt. I would say this is also a misconception too. So it answers that one previous question and this question too. A lot of people think editors need to know Japanese in order to edit Japanese text. You actually don't need to know Japanese. You need to understand the structure of Japanese to order, like, you know, because like you'll edit text and you'll be like, is this talking about singular or plural or something like that? Because Japanese doesn't have singular or plural.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it does, but it doesn't use it all the time.
It's
Like,
implied a lot, right?
It's implied, like, whether something is singular or plural. And so I have to ask, like, I have to look at the game in context and be like, oh, okay, there's multiple things here or something like that. Like, look at that rabbit. It may be the translation, but it may be like 3 rabbits or something like that there. It's just, but
Okay.
they're both correct in Japanese, like that rabbit or those rabbits or something like that. You don't know which one is which until you look at it in context.
And do you get a
need-
lot of context when doing localization? Because I know that a lot of times people receive like text dumps and it's just kind of all over the place, and you have no context. Is that more of a thing of the past at this point, or?
It really depends on the project.
Hmm.
So I like for like the Trails series when I was working on that. Well, I guess I'm still working on that with Reverie. The game's already out in Japan. If we want the context, we can just buy the game and play it.
That is true.
Which that's what I've done, and like it's been kind of nice because Trails fans are insane, and I mean that in a great way. They record like all the cutscenes and they put them on YouTube or something like that. So I even like instead of like booting up the game myself, if I needed to like double check stuff something,
Hmm.
I just went on YouTube and I looked up the scene and I would like bookmark it. I'm like, oh man, this is so convenient. It worked for voice recording too, because like I would find the cutscenes like, and I did this for Cold Steel 2 and 1 and 2 and Reverie, and I did it even for 3 and 4 too. I wasn't as involved in Cold Steel 3 or 4, but I did get involved with like the voiceover side a little bit. I
Oh,
would find all the cutscenes on YouTube for the script, and I would like paste them on the side of the script so that we could always refer to them if we needed to.
oh, that's so cool. That is so cool. Oh,
You don't need to know Japanese. It's good to understand the structure of Japanese. And you will pick that up as the more you work on Japanese to English projects.
yeah.
Um, and
Oh,
I'm trying to think like I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
oh, that is all right. That is a great answer. Thank you so much. So, and that's already like the addition of these cutscenes and things to YouTube has already kind of changed, I guess, how you have done things in the past. Have you got any predictions that you'd like to make about how localization might continue to evolve over the course of the next few years in the future?
So localization is definitely evolving. It's not in the greatest direction,
Hmm.
because of AI.
I
AI is definitely running rampant through the localization world. Like machine translation definitely happens. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of instances of like companies that will machine translate their games, so they don't have a translator,
Hmm.
and then they'll hire an editor for super cheap because they'll hire an editor for super cheap because they're like, well, it's machine translated, it should be fine. Um, it's wrong.
Yeah.
It's all wrong. 90% of it is super wrong without that human touch. Um, you need a human to understand the context of what's going on, to connect the dots through a scene. Like, only a human can do that.
Yeah.
But they'll have an editor clean it up for way, way cheap, and it honestly takes more work to clean up a machine translation than it does you know, a
Somebody who
human.
already knows what's going on.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that is an unfortunate thing that's becoming more common. Not with like localization publishing houses. I don't expect that to happen with places like NIS America or Sega
Sure.
Atlas or XSEED. Like I think they'll always use translators and editors and respect the fact that humans need jobs.
Yeah. That's
But
very important.
yeah, but some cheaper gotcha games, if things just look really, really poorly localized, it's probably because it was machine translated.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one thing that I've seen kind of becoming more of a thing. Even like and it's not just recent with like ChatGPT or whatever, but I think that machine translations through like, Google's machine translation has been kind of a thing for a while, and it is not great.
It's not great. Oh, but I will say, stuff like Google Translate and Deep TL.
Mhm.
This is actually, I think, something that might surprise you. For editors, it is actually an excellent tool.
Really?
Um, it is not something you rely on. You always want the
No.
human translator, but say you're not sure what the Japanese is saying based on the translation, because it may be a correct translation, but it could be open to emotional interpretation.
Yeah.
Maybe like this person is saying like I'm mad, and I'm like, well, are they super mad, or are they just kind of mildly pissed off? Are they irritated? Like, what is
Yeah.
the emotional spectrum? And that's just a random example. You
Sure.
might even get some help by going to Google Translate and posting in the Japanese, and it may just be like I'm irritated, or it may just be like I'm super pissed off or something like that. And it may actually give you a better idea. And then you can go to the translator and be like, hey, this is what Google Translate is giving me. I know it's not accurate, but can you give me the emotional range a little bit more so that I can make sure that's correct and stuff. And sometimes it even gives you like different words than what you're trying. Like sometimes you're stuck and you're just like, I have no idea how to edit this line. You'll paste it into Google Translate and it'll actually give you like a synonym of a certain word, and you're like, oh, that's actually a really good synonym to use. I'll use that word.
Nice.
Like you may have brought up frustrated, and you're like, frustrated is a really good word to express what's going on right now. I thought I'll use that.
That's
And
awesome.
I know that sounds weird, but it actually helps sometimes to like inspire you.
I mean, it is an art, you know, and
It is art.
just having more tools at your disposal, more brushes to paint with, really, it's never a bad thing, right? So it's awesome
not
that
at
that
all.
can be a resource for you.
Yeah, it's a great resource, but it's not something you should 100% rely on. You have to know when it's wrong. You have to know what information you're trying to get out of it. And you also just always need to rely on the human translator. Mainly, you can't just go to the human translator and be like, this is wrong. Google Translate said this. You don't do that. You don't do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to say it's 100% evil, I'm not playing devil's advocate or anything like that. I'm just saying that it is just a tool to use. It is not something to replace.
Absolutely not. I agree.
So I hope that, you know, it would be really nice if like freelancers and translators and editors could like unionize and like prevent this kind of stuff from happening.
I agree.
But that would be a very difficult thing to do on an international scale, and to also like set like, you know, like, hey, don't use AI for this kind of stuff. If you want humans, like will work for like this price kind of thing. That would be really cool. But that would be a very huge, difficult undertaking.
I imagine that would meet a lot of resistance in the industry as well, but probably also a lot of support. So I hope that something like that could happen sometime. That would be really great.
It would be really cool. I mean, I just noted, like, you know, this week, like Sega, their Irvine location, I think, just said that they've formed a union and they're trying to be recognized. And which is a localization house doing a union. Like, that's insane.
That is so cool.
I never thought I'd see the day. And I hope they get localized, or localized. Ha ha ha. I hope they get recognized.
Yes.
Because that would be fantastic. It all starts with the internal teams, really. Because, you know, that's where, like, with freelancers, like, sorry, this is just such a huge tangent.
No, I love it.
With freelancers, like, you know, we're everywhere. And if one freelancer refuses to work, they can just go to another freelancer. But when it comes to an internal company, if there's like 50 employees there, what are you going to do? Like, have all of them walk?
Yeah.
So it would be like a disaster. It would cause so much chaos. So I really hope that they get recognized. And it will inspire more unions within localization, like better conditions for localization in general. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for them.
I'm hoping for the best. Oh, so, wow. I have no idea how to tie that into the next question, so I'll just completely botch the segue.
That's totally fine.
So I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit and start talking a little bit more specifically about your time working within the Trail series.
Right.
And there is one question that has come up a lot in the circles that I run around in, and I just had to bring it up, and that is, what inspired the whole chest messages thing, and especially Trails in the Chest?
Oh my God. So the Trails chest messages from FC. I was not the one who started that. That was the amazing Jessica Chavez, who is sort of like a senpai to me in the industry.
Okay.
Man, that sounded so weeb, like my senpai.
I think
But
you're exempt from weeb status, like, because like you're the localizer, like you get to pick what is and is not too far, I think.
I guess so. So she she's so talented, but she had worked on my contributions to FC were on the PC version. So but she had worked on the PSP original version.
From way
And
back then. Okay.
and from way back then, yeah. That was 2009, something like that. I was in the industry in 2011. But yeah, like, wait, how did that work? Yeah, I moved during the 2010 housing crisis and then I got a job in 2011. Okay. Yes. Okay, I was making sure my timeline was correct. But
As we get older, it gets harder to keep that all straight.
it really does. Time just flies by. Next thing you know, it's 2023.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting. Usually when there's like a message for opening a chest, like normally most games don't have a message for opening a chest. You open the chest and then it's open and then you move on.
Yeah.
With Trails in the Sky, not only did it have a "this chest is empty" message in the Japanese, it had that same message for every single chest. Normally in games, if there's a message that's the same across all items, there's just a single cell that you translate, and that cell is programmed into, or that line of programming is programmed into all the chests.
Yeah.
But
It's like
for some
so
reason,
it's like universal, basically.
yeah, so it's like a universal thing, but for some reason, Falcom made it so that every individual chest had that message. Like, if there's 150 chests, there's 150 lines saying this chest is empty. Really nice for localization. 'Cause, it's pretty easy and straightforward to put this chest is empty. But I suppose Jess just had a really long. Jess must have been just super fried from like working on the text, because it's such a text heavy series, and after a while your brain gets loopy after working on text like that. It
Yeah.
really does. Like, those games are so huge that she saw those and she was like, I'm just gonna mess with those. And so she did. And I think Falcom wasn't I think I remember a story like hearing that Falcom wasn't into that at first.
Okay.
But it ended up staying. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I think Falcom wasn't into that message being changed all over the place. But it ended up staying in the English version, and a lot of fans obviously responded to it and were very, very into it.
Very much so.
So and ended up, that had like such a positive response that when like SC came around, SC had individual lines for this chest is empty, though not as many.
Okay.
It basically would like program one chest message for this chest is empty for like every 15 chests or something like that.
Okay.
So it would apply to like 15 different chests or something like that, but it wasn't one-to-one anymore. And that's why if you play the PSP version of SC, you'll see the unique chest messages repeated.
Okay.
So like you'll see a funny chest message and then you may go to another one later on and it has that same message.
Yeah.
But I think for the PC version, we programmed it so that they had individual ones. So we actually like changed it for the English version.
That's so cool. That sounds like it must have been a lot of extra work too. But
the programmer, Sarah, she was fine with it. She was like, hey, this is a fun feature. I can make it work. And,
That's
lo
so
and behold,
cool.
she did. And then we did the same thing for Trails in the Sky the Third. And with Trails in the Sky the Third, that was my baby.
Yeah.
That entire project, like the core team was me, the translator, Daniel Prescott, and Sarah, the programmer. So that was the core team for Trails in the Sky the Third. Very intimate project. And I wanted it to be a sort of a love letter to all the fans. because they had like waited so long for Trails in the Sky SC. The crossbow localization was up in the air. I really wanted to work on it, but we didn't know if the series was going to continue to sell well enough to justify it.
Yeah.
All that other stuff. So I was like, man, if this is going to be the last one, if we can't really get things done, I figured Cold Steel was going to keep going, but wasn't sure about crossbow.
Yeah.
So I was like, I actually recruited, instead of writing our own messages, I got most of those, like almost all of them are from fans. So I like wrote a tweet and I was just like, hey, if you want your message in Charles in the Sky the Third, like a funny chest message, drop it in this chat and it may get in the game.
Yeah.
We got a huge response. And so a lot of those chest messages are actually from fans. And then we had so many left over. We still had a ton of chests left over, like messages.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I was like, I am out of funny juice. I don't know any more funny chest messages that I can make. So I'm just going to write a novel instead.
Okay. And that's
that's where Tales in the Chest came from. And that was really like, and that was just because one of Jess's chest messages in SC had mentioned, you have a craving for trails in the chest or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm just going to take that and run with it. I'll just I thought it was kind of a cute idea that there would be random excerpts from a novel spread like, randomly, like out of order, spread throughout the chests, and that fans could actually like find those chests and then put them in order themselves. And that way they could have the whole story. And like, it would be like an interactive idea almost.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And it actually worked. Like people were going on like forums and stuff and they were like posting the chest messages they found. And there was like a master thread where they were putting them in order. And, that's how they got the whole story. And it worked great.
That is so cool. That's such a fun story.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, of course.
It was very successful. And there was even like, this is, I guess, slight spoiler for Trails in the Sky for the Third. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't played it,
I've played
I'll
it.
avoid. Okay, like.
But we can skip ahead for everybody else. But you can go ahead.
Yeah, so there is actually one point that we wanted to do in Trails in the Sky the Third successfully, and I got a lot of responses from this saying how cool it was. So I'm really glad that me and the programmer were able to do this. Because normally the chess messages are funny, they're, a lot of, people enjoy them, but there is one part that in Trails in the Sky the Third that feels like the equivalent of hell. And is very, very dark. And I was like, Sarah, I don't want chess messages in those.
Yep.
And she was like, okay. And we made all of those just this chest is empty. And everyone, like, I didn't expect anyone to really think about it, like, to notice it. But I actually actively had people like message me and be like, that was chilling, not having chess messages. And I'm like, of all things, I was like, people were so used to them being in the games that was just like weird for them not to be in the games.
It was tonally on point. It was a solid creative decision. Absolutely. Because like it's this somber moment of the game, like the joy has left and like not even the chests are there to console you.
Yes. So that was it was such a shame when later games like made it harder to do the chest messages thing. We did sneak in like puns in Cold Steel 2. Because Cold Steel 1 had just the one chest message across all chest messages, right?
Yeah.
So we couldn't do it with that one, but in Cold Steel 2 there were like these trials.
Yes, the trial chests.
The trial chests. For some reason, those basically, oh my God, my cat is on my desk and walking all over my keyboard. Oh. Come on, cat. But, so what happened was for some reason, if you talk to the chest and then you didn't have, the right, I think it was like if you didn't have the right combination of people, it would give you a unique message.
Yeah.
So I decided to make unique puns in all of those just as a little Easter egg, and that actually worked out pretty well.
That was really nice because it had to tell you, it had to have a unique message to tell you who needed to be there in order to face the trial, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was kind of fun. Like it was like a nice little throwback. And there
Yeah.
weren't too many of them, so I didn't have to, think too much. I mean, I'm not saying I created all those puns. That was definitely a team effort from, other people who have worked on trails and stuff. So, because I'm not good at puns. That is my weakness. I rely on other people for the humor.
That's all right. Rely on your strengths. But yeah, they were super great. Now, I read this somewhere, and it could be wrong because there's not a whole lot of information about this out there. But were you involved in Trails in the Chest 2 at all?
Yes.
You
Yes,
were.
I did. What happened was the Geofront localization team, because they were like a fan translation effort, and
Yeah, with
which is
Scott
crazy.
and all the team. Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually Scott who messaged me and was like, "Hey, would you be willing to write a sequel to Trails in the Chest? Because it obviously ended on a part one kind of note." And they were like, "We think it would just be a really cool idea." And I was like, "Sure." And I was like, "How many chests do I got?" And they were like, "As many as you need." And I had written like a really long one, and I had messaged Scott and I was like, "Is this enough?" And he just said, "Oh, that's a lot of chests." So I don't think he was like expecting it to be that big, but they made it work.
They certainly did. That was
So
such a
yeah,
nice little, a fun little inclusion in those
it,
games. So
it was really cool. I was like very excited to be able to do that because I was thinking like, oh, I'll never be able to write a sequel now. And it was one of those things where like if it ends on a part one note, it's kind of sad.
yeah,
Um,
agreed. So it was nice to be able to close that circle a little bit and even have some involvement in the fan localization of the Crossbell games, right?
yeah, I wasn't involved with anything else related to it, but I mean,
Yeah.
to have that was just super sweet.
Exactly. Just being able to have it's like being able to like put your initials on something, right? It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool. So
My hats off to that team. I had
they
that
did
was like,
such a phenomenal job.
it's crazy because I mean, like even a lot of smaller fan efforts don't make it to the end, and
Oh,
those are huge games, and for them to do it basically on their off time.
I know.
It's
And it's such a happy story how it kind of wrapped up with their work being used as the basis for NISA's official localizations. So, and it's just a testament to all of the work and love that they put into it. I could gush about Crossbell about the Geofront team for ages, but maybe maybe I'll save that for another day.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't mind listening because I mean, I agree with it. I think it's fantastic what they did, and it's sort of weird. You don't hear about fan translations being used as the basis for official localizations
It never
often,
happens.
but
Yeah.
for some reason, Falcom games that just kind of happens a lot. Because yeah, like a lot of XSEED titles also use fan translations as a basis. Like,
Really?
they would get cleaned up by a translator and they
Uh-huh.
would get, re-edited and stuff. But I mean, stuff like the East games, a lot of East games were also, they had
I
adopted fan translations.
I didn't realize that. That's super
Yeah.
cool though. I
East Origin, I think Felgana was also based on a fan translation at first. And East 1 and 2, I think.
really
I can't recall.
okay.
And
I'll
I may
have to
be
look.
wrong, but
I'll have to look into
sorry.
that. That's so cool. I did not know that, so I've learned something new. But
Yeah, XE was pretty open to it.
so I did have a follow-up question to some of those chess messages that we were talking about not long ago, and that's basically like, have you got any insider knowledge on maybe what tragedy befell the chests of Erebonia that rendered them mostly silent? Are they catatonic at this point? Like, I wonder what happened. And
I mean, it was basically just that they had one chest message that said this chest is empty. Like, and that was programmed to all the chests. So unfortunately, unless everybody wanted to see the same funny joke all across like 100 and some chests, that wasn't going to happen. And
Just oh man,
it,
one
I mean, we could
incredibly
have.
bad pun. Just
Oh God,
every time.
that would have been so tragic. That would have been so tragic. But yeah, it was one of those things where I don't think we didn't dare ask the dev teams to reprogram that themselves. It was easier on us for the PC versions of like the Sky games because that was our own dev.
Oh,
Like
okay.
Zara is like the English localization dev,
Uh-huh.
but we weren't going to ask the Japanese dev team to do that for us.
Okay, because so by Cold Steel, you didn't have your own dev who was working on these. Then you're mostly reliant upon the Falcom devs. Is that right?
So that's pretty common. That's pretty much the standard, even, is that you, for localization, is that you work on the English, like text and graphics and stuff on this, or sometimes you don't even work on it. You translate all of that stuff, and then you give it back to the devs, and they localize the graphics themselves because they have all the assets, and they program in the Japanese text or the English translated text, and then they give you a build of the game, and then you give them notes, and they clean up stuff based on your notes.
Okay.
So that's actually pretty normal. Having a dedicated English programmer,
That
is
was the exception.
that is more that I think it's becoming more common now for well, no, it may not even be becoming more common. That was pretty much an exception.
Wow.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. Because initially, like, I was going to say it may become more common now because the PC versions of games are becoming a standard. But I think Japanese devs are also, recognizing that the PC market is much bigger now. And so they're willing to work on PC versions of games.
Yeah.
But initially, they were just, we were actually kind of lucky at the time at XSEED because Falcom was a PC game developer that later went to console.
Yeah.
So a lot of their stuff, like, I mean, that was like an untapped market.
Yeah.
Just as like PC gaming had like Steam blowing up and stuff.
And that's a change that I could really get behind is just more games on more platforms.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and because I think that was also one of the reasons that we were able to get Trails in the Sky the third also is because of the PC. I mean, like a lot of us can't play it on the PSP at this point. If you didn't already get it from the PlayStation Store by the time it shuts down, but at least now through PC, we've got that longevity for long term being able to enjoy the third. So,
oh, I mean, we didn't even publish it for PSP. The PSP was deader than dead at that time.
That's right. The PSP version. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was really a difficult decision to not, like, I mean, we just couldn't do it. And plus it would have been a different version because the Japanese, I mean, it wasn't different. I think the text is pretty much the same, but it was a lot easier to just publish it for PC, and that would have been the definitive version anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, it would have been a very taxing thing to do for very little reward.
Definitely.
And Trails mostly found its audience, like, I mean, it had like a dedicated fan base on PSP, but it was when it got published on PC that it really blew up. Like, we were completely shocked at like how big the response was. And that's actually like the PC version saved that series.
Absolutely. Brought it back from the brink and just gave it new life in the West.
Absolutely.
It's it's such a good story to hear about how that, because the series was like hanging in the balance. It felt like, after the first couple, like, what's going to happen? But
yeah, now like, what? You have the entire Sky arc, the Crossbell arc is now, Cold Steel's out. Like, we've got Reverie coming up. Even
so excited for Reverie.
Nayuta is actually coming out.
I know. So, I was not expecting that announcement trailer the other month. Wow.
It's really cool. Like, I mean, Trails has actually got full life in the West, not even partial life anymore.
I know. It's happening. It's so exciting. Um, so I guess you've kind of already talked about this a little bit. But my next question was going to be about how much contact you actually have with Falcom staff during localization of these games. And it sounds like it's pretty much the norm, I guess, is to have a lot of direct contact. Is that right?
So yeah, we actually like if there are questions we have about the localization, which we do, we all questions with, because it's such a lore heavy series and there's a lot of stuff they set up for future games.
Mm-hmm.
That I mean, we constantly ask them questions like, what does this mean? Like,
Yeah.
we have no way of knowing or how to localize this correctly because the future games aren't out yet. Excuse me,
Exactly.
the future games
Yeah.
aren't out yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be careful with those kinds of questions too, because they're very, very strict on spoilers themselves. They don't like giving out answers. So I don't know what happens in future games at
Of
all.
course. Mm-hmm.
If I need something, I have to be like, I don't want to know what actually happens. I need to know. I will give you this translation and this translation. Which one is correct, basically? And they'll be like, that one.
Okay.
Go with that. And so we have to like be very, very delicate with how we localize things to make sure things are correct. And of course, like, you know, there's going to be little things that slip through here and there. It's games that are over 1 million characters, sometimes over 2 million characters large.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Trails in the Reverie is like 2.4 or 5, 2.5, something. It's huge.
Wow.
But it's yeah, we do have as much contact as we can get with them, and they're very open to helping us out when we need it. They're very understanding.
Well, that's.
And
Oh, go ahead.
and I mean, they're actually pretty open to like, oh, you know, this is an interesting story about how they're willing to work with the English localization team.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually about Cold Steel 2.
Okay.
So this is kind of a cool story. It's a bit of a tangent, but in Cold Steel 2, there's 2 sets of credits that run, right?
Yeah.
In the Japanese version, at the end of the finale, there's a set of credits that play.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the epilogue, there's like the real credits, basically the fuller credits.
Yeah.
In the Japanese version of the game, the first set of credits was in Japanese, I believe, and the second set of credits was in English. In the English version of the game, that would have meant 2 sets of English version credits.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. That seems kind of like it wouldn't be as cool in English. Like it doesn't have the same effect.
Mm-hmm.
So I had actually wrote to the Falcom dev team early in the localization. I was like, hey, I think that wouldn't be very cool. So I was thinking for the first set of credits after the finale, that's when they play like the main theme song and there's like lyrics and stuff like that. I was like, can we do like a montage of images throughout the series in order of when they happened, like the pretty artwork that they have?
Yeah.
And I was like, can we do a subtitle the lyrics? Because it's Japanese lyrics, so can we subtitle them in English? So almost make it like a music video.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, we can do that. That sounds cool. And I had picked out all of the images that I wanted to use and stuff, and I put them in order. And they were like, yeah, that's cool. We can do that. And then we got the first build of the game. They were like, we had the music video in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the first build and I watched it. And I was like, I don't recognize some of this artwork.
Oh.
And they were like, and I had like messaged our translator. And I was like, do you recognize this artwork? And he was like, no, I don't recognize it. And we messaged and I was like, this is great, but where did that artwork come from? And they were like, oh, it's stuff that we were going to use in Trails of Cold Steel 3, but we really liked your idea, so we just used it for this video instead. So some of it was brand new, never before seen artwork.
Oh, that is so cool.
And I remember when that got published, like when the game came out in English, there were even like Chinese fans and Korean fans who I guess were playing the English localization too. They were spamming screenshots of this new artwork
Oh,
And so, yeah, that was a case of working directly with the dev team, creating something brilliant and amazing, and it came out wonderful. And I think it had a bigger impact at that time than just running a set of credits twice.
yeah, absolutely. So, um, now I guess I don't know how much more of your time I can take from you, but
Oh, I'm fine.
oh, okay.
Sorry.
Oh
I'm
no,
just rambling.
it's totally fine. I just want to make sure that like you don't have somewhere to be or something, but
Oh, no, it's Sunday. I got nothing.
okay, awesome.
It's a lazy Sunday for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Um, so I guess the next question that kind of leads me to is like that what's something that's been particularly challenging for you in localizing or something specific that was just, you know, difficult that you remember, something that stands out as like, yeah, that was tough.
Um, well, probably the most challenging project
Yeah.
was a game called London Detective Mysteria. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's an otome game,
Okay.
and that had an interesting history behind it. It was a project that we had wanted to do years ago when it came out on PSP. It didn't work out then, and it just sort of like fell, like if we were just going to try the ultimate game stuff, and I was excited. I wanted to work on an ultimate game.
Yeah.
It didn't work out. PSP was dying and all that other stuff, and then the dev team uh, put out a Vita version with some extra content, and I was like, oh my god, please, 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 can we work on it, please, I want to try this game, please, we missed our chance. And my boss was just like, fine, we'll email them. And they were like, okay, we'll work on it with you. And the reason that game was so difficult was because I wanted to do it right.
Oh,
And it took place around like 1890s, the 1890s in London.
yeah.
So I was like, I want to write British English that is accurate to that time period.
Oh,
I wanted to
okay.
localize the game. I did not want to localize it like just with a typical like American, accent. I wanted it to sound as if it had been written from that time period.
Yeah.
And I became obsessed with reading books that came out between like 1880 to 1910. Like, so I had read literally dozens of books throughout that localization project.
Wow.
And, like the classic one, because it had featured characters, like it was being an ultimate game, of course, there were some interesting characters you could date, like Sherlock Holmes kind of character, Arsène Lupin.
Yeah.
So I ended up reading all of their books, like the Arsène Lupin books and like Sherlock Holmes novels. And like there was also the devs were like, hey, so they were very excited about this idea because I had mentioned it to them. They were like, oh, please make it accurate to like, how it would be to that time period.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the characters has a Cockney accent.
Oh.
Would you be willing to give him a Cockney accent? And I was like, sure, it's probably a small character. It was Jack the Ripper, and he
Oh.
was one of the romanceable options. So I had a whole route to write with a Cockney accent.
Oh my God.
That was so difficult. And because that is a very difficult accent to render in English, and it's one of those ones where you can't just Google how to write in a Cockney accent because everything online, they sort of have like butchered versions of Cockney that are very modern with its slang. It uses a lot of like something called rhyming slang,
Yeah.
which was basically like the word, like you can say the word stairs is rendered as like apples and pears, like, or it's like apples or something like that, because apples and pears is like a pairing, and then you use the word that doesn't rhyme for it. So apples and pears, the word for stairs is just apples. It's weird. It's like it's an interesting, like almost code kind of
That's
slang.
breaking my brain.
I ended up using like a fair decent amount of it, but what I wanted to make sure was that it was actually stuff that was used in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And
And you can't really just find a YouTube video of somebody speaking with a 1800s Cockney accent.
oh, so I ended up actually looking up famous authors that wrote that had Cockney accents, that actually wrote novels in their accents,
Oh,
and ended up reading their books. And that's a very specific thing to try and look for.
yeah.
Um, but I found it, and I ended up reading their books and got like, I would literally, as I was like writing his dialogue, I would pick up their books and I would like read through them just to sort of get into that zone.
Yeah.
Um, and it actually ended up working out really well because there were multiple characters with Cockney accents, and this character was extremely educated and a little bit more like he enunciated a little bit stronger than most characters with a Cockney accent.
Hmm.
Versus there was like one character who was super like high on drugs and and he was like drunk with alcohol, and so he
Uh-huh.
slurred, and he was virtually unintelligible. He was easy to understand in Japanese,
Hmm.
but for the English version, he ended up being really hard to understand. And I don't know. I heard like a lot of people say, hey, this is a really accurate localization. It's great. But I've also heard that these two characters in particular are particularly hard to understand. And I don't know if I just got too into it. I'm like, it's accurate, but maybe it went too advanced. I don't know.
Oh man. I mean, that happens to me regardless. Sometimes I'll be reading a Cockney accent and I'll have no idea what was said by the end of it. I'm just like, I'm sure that wasn't that important.
It is. I tried my best to make it as understandable as possible, but there may be points where it just became super difficult. And who knows? Maybe if I ever replayed the game and watched the scenes, I'd be like, I don't remember any of that. But yeah, that was by far the hardest localization. It was like I think it was. I think I remember how big it was. It was like 675,000 emoji, like characters.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty big.
Yeah.
So not as big as a Trails game, but when you're writing it, visual novels have prose
Mhm.
and all that other stuff. Like it has a lot of difficult stuff to write, and I had to make it super flowery and pretty. And
Well,
yeah, that project was just so much, but it was worth it. I think it came together really well.
that's so cool. I'm not really into Otome, but I'll maybe need to check this one out because you sold it pretty well. You know.
It's on PC now, so they later put it on PC.
Ah, that's so cool. So, I guess now shifting gears once again. I don't know what kind of vehicle I'm driving, but we're going to shift gears again, and I wanted to kind of focus on some of the other stuff that you're doing now besides just localization, because it sounds like you're getting into more some voice acting. I know that you're playing in Grand Blue Fantasy versus Rising. Is it Anila?
Mm-hmm.
And then is it Crescia or Crescia?
I believe it's Crescia.
Crescia Young from the upcoming game Zeta Wolf Chronicles, right?
Yes.
And did I hear you say earlier Reverie? that
Oh,
we can say?
I'm not voicing anything in
Oh,
Reverie, no.
okay.
Oh, no. I did the casting and
casting,
like
okay.
co-directing and stuff.
Okay. So
So I'm not voicing anything in Reverie. The reason I used to voice, like I voiced a couple small characters in Cold Steel 1 and 2, and the reason I did that is because those were like there's like 8 billion NPCs in those games, and a lot of characters have like 5 lines.
mhm.
And sometimes you just have extra ones left over. And so, I mean, even in those, there were other staff members from like XSEED and stuff like that that just went into the booth and voiced like a few small lines. So, like, we all did that.
Yeah. That's so cool.
So that's how I ended up doing Ferris and Fiona, was just because like, we had those extra characters. And, but nobody in Reverie, no.
Okay. But you're in those 2 games, and I guess what kind of inspired you to get behind the microphone?
It was initially I was resistant to it. I had worked on like, I ended up working with so many wonderful actors through Cold Steel. And it's fun to like sit behind them, like, like on the other side and like listen to everybody and give feedback and all that other stuff. And it was really fun. doing that. And then
Yeah.
I had like when I did voice like Ferris and Fiona, that was like my first time stepping into a booth ever. And it's really weird. When you step into a booth, the air just changes. It is very still because it's like they need it to be sound isolated.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was so nervous. Like I kept like crackling the water bottle in my hand, and they're like, "You can't do that. You can't do that. Okay, the mic is going to pick that up. You need to be hands free." And I was like, "Oh no, I'm messing this up already." I had no idea what I was doing. And then after that, like I was basically resigned to be like, I just want to be on this side. I don't want to be a voice actor. But I kept getting more and more interested in the idea, and with the pandemic, um, came a lot of online classes.
Yeah.
And that made it very convenient to be like, oh, I can learn a lot more about voice acting online rather than driving everywhere. Find these, like, the classes weren't as available before,
Yeah.
and they weren't terribly expensive. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take some classes and see how it goes. And then I ended up sometimes taking classes 2, 3 times a week. And I still take classes. I try to take at least classes once a week or once every other week. And I have like private coaches and stuff now too. And I just got super into it. I was super nervous at first, but then,
Yeah.
I ended up meeting like a wonderful community through it. Through like all the Zoom classes and stuff like that, you actually end up seeing like the same faces over and over, and they're all great people, and they're all getting roles too, and it's like, yay.
Oh, God, that's so
Um,
nice.
so it's just something that I decided to try, and ended up growing from there.
That's so cool. So it kind of like just started doing a few pickups for some lines that just needed, done, and then just from there it just sparked something, and you're like, maybe I could get behind the mic, right? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much, and it's been really cool. I no longer hold water bottles and crunch them around during a session. I'm totally hands free because you still get nervous, but it's also like you gain that experience to know like what to do and stuff. And I mean, I still have plenty to learn. I am a baby, honestly. I have so much to learn, but I've gained a lot more confidence now, and I am excited to, get more auditions and hopefully do more
Yeah.
with that side of things.
Well, I look forward to hearing more of you in upcoming games.
Yay.
That's so awesome. Are you looking at just games, or are you looking at like other localization efforts as well in the near future?
I will look at pretty much whatever I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. So,
Yeah.
um, so I guess you're getting roles now. You're very new, fresh faced into the industry. What would you say to somebody who's thinking about, stepping into the industry, dipping their toes in, any starry eyed young 36-year-old YouTubers who are like, man. Maybe I could get into voice acting. I don't know. What would you say to them? Like, what would your advice be to those, whoever that could be?
Well, I mean, the nice thing is that remote is becoming like, remote pretty much like got big during the pandemic, and it's here to stay. Like there are going to be like always studios or like games that prefer to have everybody in studio, but there's also a lot that are doing remote
Yeah.
casting. So it's a fantastic time for pretty much anyone to join. And I would say take classes. The do like the online workshops that are available. There's a ton. Um,
Are
sorry
there
about
any
that.
that you would recommend specifically?
There is some really great stuff at Real Voice LA.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they even have classes that are like $20 to $30. Like it's
Oh, that's nothing.
beyond reasonable.
Yeah.
But they have like coaches that are all like guest coaches that are like $100, which is a great price. Ace Studios also has a bunch of Zoom classes that are around like $60, which is a crazy good price. There's Sound On Studio
Hmm.
that has a lot of guests. You always want to be there right on time, like as soon as they open classes up, because those go quick, like
Okay.
sometimes within minutes.
Wow.
But they
Okay.
have, I mean, some crazy good guests. like Greg Chun and um, Chris Hackney and like, some really amazing veterans.
That is awesome.
There's a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge and wisdom to give, and it also not even just helps you learn. It helps you get used to being behind the mic. It helps you get comfortable.
Yeah.
And hearing feedback from people, like you get a lot of different opinions. Like it's good to take all kinds of classes with all different kinds of people because they all have different thoughts and to give. And even like in different genres, like I have like a coach for commercial
Oh, yeah.
stuff. So I have some like commercial classes I've taken the most of, honestly. I've taken like I try to take one like every other week if I can. And I used to do it twice a week.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I have somebody for like animation. I have somebody for games. I have a coach now for anime, which I'm not really into anime, but it would be cool.
That would be pretty dang cool.
That which I've discovered is an entire art in and of itself. It's insane how much skill you need to do to be able to do an anime. You
To
have
match the flaps. Oh,
You have to read a script, match the flaps on screen, and then you also have to act at the same time. You have to have the brain power on top of doing those things to act out the line.
it sounds intense.
It's a very intense thing, and there's not a lot of places where you can learn how to do that other than just like you mostly just have to go watch something on like Crunchyroll or something like that, mute it, and then read the subtitles out loud to try and match it yourself. Like that's the only way you can practice.
Yeah.
Because there aren't very many classes that like teach that. There are some, but not many.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that I'm recording this so I can write that stuff down later.
I can give it to you after too. I love like sharing how to like do that stuff.
Okay.
It's awesome.
That'd be awesome. So thank you. So I guess just to sort of tie a nice little bow on everything here that we've talked about today, and bring it all back around. So what would you think, what is your dream gig at this point, whether that be through voice acting or localization or both? What's your dream project to work on right now?
Oh man, I would love to work on a Square Enix game. Because I'm a freelancer now, so I can like work on all kinds of stuff. But I mean, if I could work on like, I don't know if I have the chops for it, to be honest, but if I could work on like an Evilise type title. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm good enough for that kind of stuff, but.
I wouldn't discount yourself if.
Well, thank you. But I would love to work on like an Evilise type title or just any Square Enix game in general, honestly. I think that would just be an awesome feather in my cap. And voice acting, I still feel so baby that I'm just like already like, I don't know if I want to dream that big yet.
Oh, okay.
So I want to keep my expectations modest for now.
Okay.
But I would love to work on more video games and gain more experience there, basically.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you are, and I'm positive that at some point you will land a spot at Square Enix doing one of those localizations for hopefully an Evilise title. It would be so great to see your name show up in those credits someday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I guess is there anything else that you wanted to say to get off your chest? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
All right. So right now, Localization has a shortage of editors. If you want to be an editor, come on in. The water's fine.
Okay.
It is challenging to get work in Localization, but at the same time, like there's not that many editors right now. So if you want to be a freelance editor, if you've always been curious, like practice and give it a shot. It's a great time to be an editor.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I thank you all so much for watching at home. And I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Hatsuu, a.k.a. Brittany Avery, a.k.a. Leona Renee. And you've been a wonderful guest to have on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Bye.